I'm delighted to have you join me. This session is one that I want it to be really interactive, and so I want you to hopefully engage with me in this session. This is not a sermon like I just tried to preach in the first time. This is really more of a lecture highlighting some research and things that I've read and wanting to create a discussion about smartphone, whether it is a master or a slave. And those are pretty provocative terms, but I think they are a reality we need to look at. Just so you understand, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not anti-technology. I have an a computer. I'm using an iPad for part of the time, and I have an iPhone. So just so you understand, this is not an anti-technology session. At the same time, there is a need for looking at some of the things that can be potentially hazardous to our health, to our relationships, even to our culture at large. And there's a lot of things that we can look into today. And again, I want to hopefully encourage you to participate and to give opportunities for you to chime in. So let me pray and ask God's blessing upon our time. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that you love us. Thank you that you know the time and season in which we live, that we don't live in the 1500s or the 1200s or the 100s. We live in the 21st century. We live in 2017, and therefore we need to learn how to navigate with the tools and resources that are at our disposal, and yet to recognize that we need to do so judiciously, that we need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We would recognize that many things in life have both a potential to be something that is a blessing and something that can be a great burden or a bondage to us. Lord, help us to really examine our own use of technology, and especially with regards to our children and our teens, the things that we could realize that how they're being affected by it. And I pray that you would guide my words and my thoughts today. In Jesus' name, amen. We live in a very unique time in the history of the world when it comes to the advancement of technology. The advancement affects nearly every sphere of life, and all of us, no matter how much we may want to deny it, are affected by it in both positive and negative ways. Again, I'm not a Luddite, a term that came into being with people that were against the Industrial Revolution and the advancement of technology in general, whether that's from production equipment in a factory or a farm, having tractors, things of that nature, to the modern day use of saying that we're anti-technology in some way of using computers or things of that nature. But the reality is we need to recognize that this technology and the advancement of it has affected nearly every sphere of life, and it affects all of us, no matter how much we may want to deny it. We are affected in the both positive and negative ways. Now, in the past 10 years, a particular technology came in like a tsunami. That, if you've ever seen a tsunami or a video of the tsunami, for instance, that hit Japan, when a wave comes into the shore, it normally comes in, even a big wave, and then what happens? It recedes, it goes out. Well, a tsunami sometimes comes in even low and small, not a gigantic wave, but it's coming and coming and coming, and its force and impact overwhelming the land. And this particular technology that came into being 10 years ago hit the shore in a normal wave-like manner, but never receded, and it has continued to keep coming and overwhelming the entire globe in essence. The phenomena that I speak of is the invention of the smartphone. The invention of the smartphone, which, by the way, I was supposed to set mine so that I know what time I'm supposed to be done. So I will do that now. With the with the invention of the smartphone, first presented by Steve Jobs, and there was some other phones. How many of you remember the Trio? Any of you use a Trio phone or the Blackberries that had the keypads, and they were basically texting phones, and that brought a new part of the technology. But the first touchscreen phone that was of the level of technology and the amount of computer that was in an iPhone, it was the very first time for a smartphone to hit the world. Now think about this. The phone that you have in your pocket is more computer by multiplied times than when the Apollo astronauts landed on the moon. All the computers that they had were less than what you have in your pocket if you have a smartphone today. This is an amazing machine. It's an amazing invention, an amazing piece of technology. And it has many wonderful uses that I want to look at, but it has hit the world. It's hard to believe that this is an iPhone, has only been around for 10 years. Now think about your life now. Probably, I won't ask for a show of hands, probably most every adult in the room has some type of a smartphone, a mobile device, an iPad, or the likes of it. It's almost unimaginable what our day-to-day life would be like without a smartphone. Everything from how we get to the store, or find a new place on a map, it's integrated into all of culture. And 10 years for that to take place is an amazing feat when you look at things that have come about in other times of history. Even something like the automobile, it took many years for it to become something that more than just a few elite people had. It was a novelty kind of a thing. Many people thought that the iPhone would be that kind of a novel device, and it wouldn't make that big of an impact. But it's become possibly the most impactful technology hitting humanity ever in its reach. People today could be in the middle of the bush in Africa and have a mobile device with wireless internet through the cell phone waves, connecting people like never before. Many of the things are positives. They are good things, but they have many potential dangers. Smartphones have potential for impact for both good and bad, and I want to address those today and asking the question, is your smartphone your master or is it your slave? Or are you the master and it your slave? The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 6:12, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. It says in 1 Corinthians 10, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up or edify. You have to ask yourself, is it right or wrong to have a smartphone? I believe it can be right, it can be lawful, but you need to be careful that it does not dominate you. It needs to be a tool that's used as your servant, and that you would allow it to be something that builds you up and does not tear you down, because it is affecting people in both directions. Now, this is true with men and women, fathers, mothers, youth, children. Oftentimes are being given devices, something that I want to speak to in a bit and caution against. But let's talk about, first of all, some smartphones' positive use. I'll throw out a few, and then I want you to participate. Communication. Communication has never been easier. 15 years ago, I traveled to Papua New Guinea, and I came home, and I had a $700 phone bill. How many of you like $700 phone bills? How many of you ever lived a distance from your spouse for a season or your fiance, and you just wanted to communicate, and you had to get on the phone, and you had to pay big charge, and you realized at the end of the month, maybe even in America, if you were going state to state, you could pay a very large phone bill. You get it at all that sweet talk, and it turns out you have a heavy bill to pay. All right? I had a $700 phone bill after being in Papua New Guinea because I needed to communicate with my wife and kids who were back home. Now, I have unlimited texting because I added an international plan for my travel. I can communicate back and forth with my wife and kids all day long for free. I think that's a positive benefit. Right? So these are things I want to look at that are positive. Commerce. I do my banking on my phone. I don't have to go to the bank anymore. I can take a picture of my check and deposit it. It's really an amazing thing, this advancement in technology. Businesses today, maybe with few exceptions, businesses today, if they don't have technology involved through social media and things of that nature, they probably won't last very long into the future. Because that's how people communicate. That's how people shop. That's how people are experiencing so much with commerce. Some people in this room may have created businesses where you work from home now because you make your living off of your technology devices, via selling things on the internet or giving services or something of that nature. So commerce. My calendar. I have a calendar, and it syncs. It's a beautiful thing with my computer, my phone in my pocket, and I have a schedule-driven life, right? In the sense of I have counseling appointments in the afternoon, I have study in the morning, I have visitation, maybe I'm doing at night. There's all different kinds of things. I have family events, and it keeps me on track. It's important for my schedule, or as do you say like the Brits, the schedule, or is it just schedule? Schedule, okay. So you have a schedule, and you have to keep it. Some people's jobs don't require that. You may be, Nathan is a dairy herdsman, and his job, there are things he has to do every day. There are tasks that he has to do, but there's a rhythm to it that doesn't require probably calendaring all those things every day, because you have milkings, you have bringing the cows out to pasture, you have taking care of sick animals, probably hand feeding calves and things of that nature. You have a variety of things that you do, but they're just a part of the normal rhythm of your work. And other people, that maybe you're a family practice doctor, right? You have calendar, you have appointments, and they're scheduled like on top of each other, probably every 15, 20 minutes, and you have people working with you as your schedule goes. And we have all different kinds of kind of work relationships, but mine is really calendars are very important. And so this is a helpful thing for me. Email, it's a lot faster than sending a mail. It's not the same as getting a handwritten letter, by the way. Just as a little aside, the art of writing and getting letters and things of that nature, I think, should be retained, but that's for another topic. So, but email is a handy communicating device. It can, however, become a negative if you're constantly having to check your mail because you're addicted to knowing what's just come in, and it's interrupting the relationships you have with others. Maps. My wife loves maps on the phone. Okay? She uses it all the time. Myself, I kind of have a little more intuitive nature of like, I need to get over here, and if I get off track, I kind of know directionally I got to keep going over there. I'll still use it on a big trip if I'm looking to find a way, but I'm a man, so I just like the adventure of, having to get out and, we're going to be going over there, let's find this street and go over here, and we get there. Now, I'm not afraid to ask directions, but if I get lost, but she loves the maps. It's a great tool. News. You can resource your news on this. Our family doesn't have cable television. We don't have TV. We have a monitor, but we don't have TV in our house. I'm not saying that's a standard for everybody else, but we don't have a TV. But having the ability to look at the news or see things like that, we can do that through our technology. Music. My phone holds vast amounts of music that I own, and you used to have, if you had a collection of music, you could have either a box of records or boxes of tapes or maybe CDs, and they get scratched. Now, my CDs never get scratched, right? They're here in this device. That is an amazing advancement of technology. What came out before the smartphone was an iPod, an MP3 player. That was a major shift think about this, in an entire industry of music, completely changed because of the invention of a piece of technology. The iPod went out of existence almost completely because of the phone. If you can have a phone and your music and everything else, it's all right there. Audiobooks. I love audiobooks. Entertainment, I would say within moderation, right? We can enjoy some recreation. But what are some other positive things? I want some feedback. What do you use your iPhone for? I know some professionals. One of my dearest friends is a family practice doctor, just like this brother, and they have on their phone all their prescription, like what kind of dosage to give and research, all that is right there on their phone. And so that becomes an actual, I'll use this word, like a hammer, this becomes a tool for a lot of forms of work. What are some of the things, and I want some feedback, how you might find the phone to be productive in your life? What are some things that you think have been beneficial? Yeah. I don't know how I could forget that. I remember hearing it was a New York Times famous photographer, and she was asked what her best camera was. She said her iPhone, because it was always with her and she could capture it. I don't even know why I didn't mention the phone, but phone and video, camera and video is exceptional on this device, better than any camera I've ever owned. And it's right there, all contained. That's another positive. We have pictures of our family and friends, and we get to share those. That's a beautiful aspect. It can be used for good. It can also be used for bad, right? Okay, what else? You had one.
Trello for organising tasks that need to be done between the team of people.
A trailer?
It's called Trello.
Triller? Okay, so like a task management that can be worked on by a lot of different people, and you collaborate, and everybody's collaborating, and it's coming onto their phones. That makes it amazing for project management. Excellent. That's a great one. Yes, sir. A Bible on your phone. Yeah, another great one. I have a Bible app. I'm kind of... I would always, if somebody's asked me, do you have a prep? I use Logos Bible software, and I have Olive Tree, and people use YouVersion or whatever Bible apps. I would say this as a Christian, and this is maybe there's a reason for it, but I would always encourage believers to still have a codex, an actual text Bible, and have that, because it marks you in a different way when you read a book, and that's been proven by. This is not taking away from that. I use it all the time. I want to be clear. At the same time, the way you get into a book or the Bible that's a codex, that's an actual paper and ink, it engages with your brain differently. And not just Christians, the science of that is not just being produced by Christians, but by people that recognize there's something that is unique about paper, manuscript, or whatever that you're working with, and how it affects you. So I would encourage you to still carry a Bible, but that is a phenomenal tool. You have it anywhere you go, okay? Somebody else had their hand up. Any other positives? Yes, sir. A torch. We call those flashlights in the States. Is that what you mean? Did I get it right? Yes! All right. A torch. It's handy. It's right there. Yes, sir. Podcaster. Resources, things like books and things that you can get that are rich resources from all over the globe, right? Even that is a wonderful thing. Anybody else have something? Yes, sir.
Sports tracking.
Yep. Yeah, things of that nature. You can do all kinds of things. You can have, you used to have and my family still does, but there's a recipe box in our kitchen with recipes on it. What does that recipe box look like after 20 years? It has a lot of memories there, but it also has a lot of flour and a lot of things that are stuck to it. Now, you can have a recipe book. You can get any recipe, have this propped up. You can cook using a recipe from many recipe apps, as one example. There's a lot of wonderful ways in which you can use your phone, okay? So many positive things that can be resourced. A lot of Christian ministries have resources for phones and apps and things of that nature. There's many more, I'm sure, that we could bring out. But there are also things to be aware of, and that is that smartphones, and this ties into the afternoon session I'm going to do on social media, particularly in relation to how we communicate together via social media. It is affecting relationships. And I would say, even though it seems like people are becoming more and more connected, especially amongst young people, there's a great amount of depression and discouragement that's taking place because of the use of their phones. In many different ways. If you found that your smartphone is damaging relationships with the people you love the most, and it can, if you've ever been to a restaurant or somewhere and you see parents looking at their phone and kids trying to talk with them, not engaging with them, or if you've ever been on a lovely date with your spouse and you notice maybe it's your spouse looking at their phone and you're like, we're here out to dinner and you're looking at your phone, checking the scores or taking a text or looking at an email, and it can erode the relationships to where there becomes a despising of this device that has many benefits. So we just looked at many of the positive benefits, but now it becomes something that is looked at as an enemy because it's getting in between relationships. Maybe it's parents who have given, because maybe, and I'm going to say some things you may not like and you don't have to agree with me. I'm going to give you some of my opinions. They're not scriptural chapter and verse, but there's some wisdom principles. If you've given your children free rein to their own smartphones, and now you are struggling and wondering why they're distant from you, and you no longer have a relationship with them, and they hide in their rooms, and they never come and talk to you, and you wonder why there's maybe a disrespect. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that might be, and it has a lot to do likely with their phone and the way they're using it. Your relationships can be broken. And if those relationships are broken, there's likely that the distraction of an iPhone or a smartphone can also affect your relationship with God, because instead of going maybe to the Word of God first for your own personal time in the Word, you're going to your phone to check what's happening, what your email is, things of that nature. There's a book on the back table that says, it's called 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. And this is I'm going to give you a highlight of the chapters, and this is not, I'm giving full credit. I'm not plagiarizing. I'm not giving you the content of the book, but the chapters describe 12 ways our phone is changing us. Number 1, we are addicted to distractions. Have you ever noticed people today, especially kids, if they're given an iPhone or some kind of a device, they don't suffer with something we suffered with when we were young. It's called boredom. Do you ever remember as a kid saying, "I'm bored"? To use that terminology, what did that mean? It was time when you didn't have anything immediately entertaining you or immediately present to you, and you just had to sit there and think or make something up or be creative or go out and play, okay? Now, today, boredom for people who have a device is almost non-existent. Everywhere you go, you can be entertaining yourself. You can be shooting Angry Birds or playing Scrabble or doing whatever on your phone, and you're just entertaining And as Neil Postman said back in the 70s, before smartphones ever existed, we are in a culture that's ever increasingly entertaining themselves to death. He was a sociologist, and his recognition of the way things were going with TV and technology of that time. We are addicted to distractions with the phone. Any little buzz or alert or tweet or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden we go from engaged in conversation, doing some task, working on a study, reading our Bible, to all of a sudden. And let me tell you, if you're interested in studying about how those things affect you, the moment you're distracted by something like that, the amount of time that it takes to get back on task for what you're doing is several minutes to every distraction. And you think about how much we live a distracted life, and we're addicted to that. We need to distract ourselves. It helps us sometimes not to deal with reality. Number 2, he says we ignore flesh and blood. I already mentioned this. We can be in the very presence of the people that we love the most and completely be ignoring them because we're focused on our phone. This is both men and women, okay? We crave immediate approval, meaning we post a picture to Instagram or to Facebook or Twitter or any number of social media platforms, Snapchat, and we're looking. Who liked it? Who approves? Who thinks my picture's beautiful? Who loves the quote that I put up? Who likes even the picture of me reading my Bible and having a perfect cup of coffee on a cool morning in New Zealand? We want instant approval for the things that we're doing. And that is something that is creating a discontentment with reality, because that's a perception of, we're able to put up the pictures that allow people to perceive us in the best way, right? You don't usually, if you have social media, you don't usually see a lot of people posting their pictures where, they are in the, unflattering position. It's a picture that makes them look big, or it's a picture with them with their hair all a mess, or it's a picture where, they were in their pajamas, or whatever the case may be. They don't just go posting those because it doesn't give off the aura that they want to have for people to see them in. Because we crave immediate approval. Number 4, we lose our literacy. People don't read like they used to read. The amount of people who read, and long-form reading is different than short-form reading. Long-form meaning essays and books and things of that nature versus little blurbs. A typical blog post is between 500 and 700 words, whereas a book may be between 100 and 500 pages. An essay will be many pages long. So you have something that you have to read a short blurb about. Maybe a tweet is 140 characters, right? And you can say a lot of strong words or kind words in 140 characters, but you can't really dig deeply into a topic. And so people have lost their literacy. They're not growing and learning and reading. And when you have a soundbite about something, it is not the same thing as having, I'll use the word, soaked in a book of significance, right? Number 5, we feed on the produced, meaning we want everything done for us, packaged in this perfect way that we get on our phone. Number 6, we become like what we like, meaning especially amongst young people, and it affects adults as well, but they become like what they like, meaning like in parentheses on Facebook, they begin to follow a certain tribe, they begin to follow a certain culture or a certain type of style or a certain group, and they want to become like that. It's a form of, you could say, peer pressure, but it's through social media and things of that nature, and they have a desire to be liked by the same people that they like. Does that make sense? I'm using the term like and like, meaning when you push something on Facebook, you're liking it, right? And they want to become like that. And this is particularly true with young people, right? And they are often influenced by people that you don't want them to be like, right? And I would encourage all of the young people to listen carefully now, because it is affecting you. It is impacting you. There's a negative effect. One of those, and this is number 7, is we get lonely. We get lonely. Even though we have lots of people liking us, and we have lots of friends on Facebook, and we are getting noticed for something we've done, or something crazy we've done on a YouTube video has gone viral, and 10 people have watched it, and that's viral for us, and we're now gratified in that, and yet we still, and particularly young people, still sit in their rooms lonely, without friends, and become increasingly depressed. I'll just say number next. We know there's 12 of them. I don't have them numbered. We get comfortable in secret vices. And one of the clear dangers of a phone is the kind of negative things we can get caught up in. Gossip, really being vicious with comments and things on Facebook that we would never speak to somebody in person. Christians, it doesn't matter whether it's online or not, we should be careful to walk in godliness. Well, what about secret vices? This is beautiful. We talked about pictures. We can send pictures and things of that nature, and videos and things of that nature, but it's also the number one place where people would go to watch pornography is through their phone. They have the anonymity of hiding in a room or a bathroom stall or wherever it might be to view inappropriate material that is devastating to their person. It's a secret sin that brings corruption to their heart and mind and life, and distances them from real relationships. Whether that's their spouse or their future spouse, it creates a barrier that is something we should flee from. Also, that could include being involved in messaging and communication with people of the opposite sex that is outside of the knowledge of your spouse, and that can become a trap for you. That's a real danger. In America, it's been said that in the last, I don't remember if it's exactly 15 years, but somewhere around in there, since Facebook came into existence, in the divorce courts, in the documents, the word that is searchable, that can be found, that's now a dominant theme, is Facebook is a part of the divorce, reasons why they're getting a divorce, and it's become epidemic. So there's both positives it can be used for and very negatives. We lose meaning. What is real? What is liking something for a great charity somewhere around the world the same thing as going and caring for somebody who's in need or poor down the street? It's not the same thing, right? Sharing something just so that you have people think you're sympathetic towards people in need is different than actually helping somebody who might be actually in need. We fear missing out. We fear like if we let the phone down for a second, we're going to miss something that could be really important. We become harsh to one another in real relationships because we're too busy living our alternative world, in our alternative world. We lose our place in time. How many of you ever noticed that you can get on the internet, whether it's on your computer or on your phone, and you think, I'm just going to check something real quick, and an hour and a half later, you realize, oh, wow, I'm late I missed dinner. We lose a sense of the place of time. There are countless ways in which smartphones can be dangerous. And they go far beyond people originally with computers and smartphones. There's a lot of talk about screen time. There's the negative influence of it, like even the screen, the colors of the screen, all those kinds of things, and how that affects you. That is true, but it is far less important than the other kinds of effects that it has on you. For young people, Sleep deprivation is a major problem with having a smartphone. Many of them, they found in studies, they sleep with their phone in their bed. It's constant, instant communication. Sleep deprivation causes compromised thinking and reasoning skills, moodiness, susceptibility to illness, weight gain, high blood pressure, anxiety, depression. All kinds of significant problems take place with just the influence of sleep deprivation. Let alone when you think about what's happening, and I may mention this in the next the session on social media. When you think about having your child have what one author in the New Yorker, which is a very liberal magazine, said, infinity in your pocket, and then you give it to your 12-year-old, and they take it to their room, and they can look it up and look at anything that the world has to offer, and you think they're not going to be affected negatively, you need to think again. One author wrote this. Her name is Jean Twing in The Atlantic. Again, these are non-Christian sources, and I'm bringing that out because I want you to see this is not just some crazy conservative Christian with his ideals against iPhones. I have one. I'm saying we need to be aware this is something that people are recognizing. Now listen to this quote. The advent of the smartphone and its cousin, the tablet, was followed quickly by a handwriting about the deleterious effects, the negative effects of screen time. But the impact of these devices has not been fully appreciated, and it goes far beyond the usual concerns about curtailed attention spans. The arrival of the smartphone has radically changed every aspect of a teenager's lives, from the nature of their social interaction to their mental health. These changes have affected young people in every corner of the nation and in every type of household. The trends appear among teens, poor and rich, of every ethnic background, in cities, in suburbs, and in small towns. Listen to this next statement. Where there are cell towers, there are teens living their lives on their smartphones. Living their lives on their smartphones. All kinds of things that in previous generations used to be absolutely normative are now not even a part of young people's lives. No interest in getting something, and this is not a spiritual thing. No interest. Do you remember when if you're older than 30, do you remember when you were old enough to get your driver's license? Did you have to be prodded? Maybe there's exceptions, but did you have to be prodded and encouraged? Or were you like me and most of my fellow Americans, like we were waiting at the door for the day we could get our driver's license to take the test? And we may have failed the first time or two, but we were ready, because we wanted that freedom, that independence. We wanted to be able to get in a car and drive. Now, many people who are in their young adulthood, 18, 19, and 20, haven't even gotten their driver's license because they have no motivation to go anywhere, to be involved in relationships with other people, because they do it all on their phone in their bedroom. Same author writes, even when seismic events, meaning affecting the culture, like a war, a technology leap, or she uses the term, this is an American thing, a free concert in the mud, and I'm pretty sure she's talking about during the 60s, and Woodstock was a revolutionary part of the sexual revolution of the 60s. Plays an outsized role in shaping a group of young people. No single factor ever defines a generation. Meaning there's multiple things. Parenting styles continue to change, as do school curricula and culture, and these things matter. But the twin rise of the smartphone and social media has caused an earthquake of a magnitude we've not seen in a very long time, if ever. There is compelling evidence that the devices we've placed in young people's hands are having profound effects on their lives and making them seriously unhappy. Seriously unhappy. But they're addicted to them. They can't give them up. But the depression rates amongst young people taking their lives, suicide rates, is growing astronomically. Even when other things like teenage pregnancy are on the downturn, because they're not in real relationships, and that's a good thing, right? Not to be in a sexual relationship outside of marriage. But the picture is they're not actually out doing things with other people. They're living their lives on their phone in their room, leaving the house, a 12th grader, a senior in high school, leaving the house less than an 8th grader of a generation ago did to be involved in social interaction. And the rise of teen suicide is on the increase, and at least in the States, and amongst females, 50% rise amongst teenagers. Because so much of the kind of culture of girls wanting to be accepted by other girls and then being shunned, but instead of it being in person, they're being shunned on social media. They're being shunned by not being accepted or allowed, or not being at the party where everybody's taking their pictures to make themselves look important, things of that nature. There's a great amount of dangers. It also has affected how much we're in real human contact. You know, human touch is powerful. All throughout Scripture, there's talk of blessings, laying on of hands, praying over people, Abrahamic blessing. There's all kinds of pictures of that throughout the Scriptures, and there's significance. Talks about the brethren greeting one another with a holy kiss and embracing one another, being in genuine relationships. Well, now people touch their phones more than they touch people. Here's a question for you. The research I'm going to read you from is from age ranges from 18 to 45, gender 48% male, 52% female, and from a wide variety of races, okay? I'm just going to bring a few highlights of this. It looked at 4 things. Focus, touchiness, quick hits, and reactions. This is talking about how people use their phones. Mobile life is focused on social and messaging more than any other category. The usage is limited to a narrow set of apps dominated by billion-dollar players. So the focus is ultimately, there's people behind everything that are making money. Touchiness, how much people touch their phones, how they get quick hits, and then also reactions to people in this survey. So let me ask you a question. How many times a day do you think that the average person taps, swipes, clicks, or touches their phone? How many? 200. 500. 1,000. Do I hear 2,000? Yep. We're at an auction, right? Okay, listen to this. This is where we don't understand how things are impacting us. The average user of that age group, half male, half female, all kinds of races, all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, the average user touches their phone 2,617 times a day. The average daily minutes they spend is 145. Now think about the distraction of 145 minutes spent on a phone. And granted, there are some things we can say we used it for purposes that were effective and a part of our work, and we used it as a servant and it wasn't our master. It was a tool, right? We all use tools. But the reality of it is, a whole lot of those 2,617 times probably were just distractions and frittering away of life. Not just time. Time is life. Heavy users amongst the young people. What do you think the heavy users amongst the young people would be? Touches. Some have that, But the average, the heavy user, 5,427 touches a day. 225 average daily minutes spent on their phone. Most of them in seclusion, away from family, living in their bedrooms. Which, by the way, I'll just say, if that's your children, you need to love them enough to make that stop immediately. There's all kinds of research. What do you think the most used app or purpose is on the phone? Facebook. 15% of all of those thousands is Facebook. Number 2, what do you think it is? No, it's messages. So text messages. And we could say a lot of those, that may be a valuable communication device for work, communication, things of that nature. At the same time, a lot of texting probably has just to do with very loose communication, chattering away with all kinds of people, sometimes not for profit. Things like the home screen, Chrome, Messenger for Facebook is 3%, WhatsApp 3%, Twitter 1%, Snapchat 1%, things like email 1%, the things are productive, Instagram 3%. This is from 2016, so those things obviously have probably changed. It's already old and outdated. Games were the things that had the most touches because people are constantly touching their phone in a game. And you think, okay, games. My house is not a game house. And because early on, maybe partly because I just wasn't attracted to games. I had an Atari system way back in the day. I had a Nintendo, the first one that came out with Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. Those were the 2 games. And it just never clicked with me. And so I didn't become as much like loving of that as others. But then as time went on, and as a pastor, I dealt with men. And I say men and women both can play video games, but predominantly it's men. And when I was dealing with men, this was when my kids were still young, that they weren't coming to the dinner table and they were having horrible relationship with their family because they were spending upwards of 40 hours a week playing things like Axis and Allies. Communicating with other people around the globe to play a game for what would be a whole nother work week in America, 40 hours. And destroying relationships, losing the hearts of their kids. By the way, that one family, I could say, sadly, their kids totally have rebelled against anything to do with God and have lived a very hard life. And I remember the time when they were at my home and one of the daughters saying, for the first time, my dad's engaging in us, in our lives, and spending time with us. And she was overjoyed. She was a teenager. And then 2 years later, just kind of given over to his own flesh. So I would say with games, you may use them, and I'm not saying that they're sinful or wrong. I'm saying you better clock just how much you're giving yourself over to that. If you have a family and you're spending all day Saturday playing your video games, you probably have a problem. Be honest enough to look at that. You might say, well, I don't sit down in front of the TV, but what do you fritter away on the phone, all right? So I know I'm doing a lot of meddling in things today that you may or may not like. Let me give you some action points. And this is some, I'm going to be very clear, this is not thus saith the Lord. Here's some things I would encourage you to think about, right? If you right now are evaluating how you use your phone, just being in this room, you might say, you know what, I think that the phone has maybe too much of an influence. Here's a start. Take Sunday, or maybe you choose Saturday, as a Sabbath weekly from your smartphone. Just shut it down. Be with your family, and maybe work requires you to check it once in the day or whatever, but if you can choose a day, that's one option. I'm not saying it has to be, and I'm not saying that's necessarily my weekly practice, though I do try to ignore it more on the Lord's Day. That's one thing that you could do. maybe as a way to see. And here's one thing you'll see. If you try to do that one day and you realize you're having withdrawals, if you study about this, the way that your phone affects you and the dopamine squirts that your brain gets, similar to drug usage, you'll find you're really having a problem, like having that phone shut off over the dresser and not being able to reach into your pocket and pull it out. Like when I said yesterday, when I was in the driver's seat in America and Chris started backing up, and I turned to look over my shoulder, and instinctively, I put my hand on the steering wheel that didn't exist. It was a rote memory pattern, right? And the phone has the same potential. And if you find out, wow, I couldn't go 2 hours, then maybe you need to really look and say, how can I dial that back? I would encourage you, turn off all of your notifications on your phone. Except for me, I have text messaging, gets notifications because that's how people communicate with me from the office, things of that nature. I don't get, if I was to get messages or buzzers or dingers or whatever you call them, notifications from every email, it would just be going bing, 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 bing. It would go crazy. And a lot of people live with that. I just want to say, it's distracting you. It is causing even anxiety in you, even if you don't recognize it. Turn your smartphone into a very capable dumb phone. Okay? This was advice given by one author who wrote a blog post, again, a non-Christian, and that's what I've done. I have, and again, I'm not saying this is what you need to do. For me and for everyone in my household, we have, the beauty of an iPhone is you can secure a lot of things on it. Ratings of things, you can shut down. I don't have Safari. I don't have a web browser. For some of you, maybe work requires that. For me, I do everything on apps. That keeps at least one thing. One, there's a lot of stuff that I don't want and I don't want my kids to have access to. But I find that the phone is very functional and I can do a lot of things with all the apps that I need without having the ability to spend endless hours surfing the internet. Okay? You got a camera, you got a messaging, you got phone, and you've got all the resources you need, and if you don't have the notifications, you go to it when you need it. Okay? Think about this. If you're a mechanic, you don't have all the tools popping up and saying, use me, use me, use me. You go to the toolbox. When you need that tool, you pick it out. Right? You need to look at your phone like a toolbox and say, when I need that tool, I'm going to go to the toolbox and take it out of the toolbox, and I'm going to use the tool. Rather than having the tool saying, hello, use me. Okay? Turn it into, and this is something you won't like, turn it into a tool more than a toy. Consider limiting your social media on your smartphone. Instead, access it from your computer so it's not constant instant. I have gone back and forth. This is just honest, like, confession. At times I've had Facebook or on my phone, and at times I take it all the way off and just say, I don't need that being a constant, because there's just that, I want to be able to sit somewhere and think, instead of say, I'm sitting, I've got to look at my iPhone. Consider having all smartphones in a central location in the home when you come home at night and it's time for meals and things of that nature, where you just don't have them distracting everything. This is where I'm going to say, I think it is very unwise to let your children have unfettered access to their phones, or even to have phones at all hours of the day in the privacy of their rooms. And here, I'm saying, I have a house full of kids from 22 down to on the way. And I would encourage you to think about the fact that we lived without this capability. They will live too. Even Steve Jobs, the creator of the iPhone, limited the use. He did not give them unfettered access to his own children because he wanted them to develop intellectually and artistically. He knew the dangers as well as the blessings. Consider having dinner hour at minimum be a phone-free zone. and I'm guilty of sometimes breaking this rule. But at the same time, we've recognized that there are problems, there are things that need to be addressed. The last thing I'll say, because I know a lot of you won't be here at the next session, with regards to social media and your kids having phones, and by kids, I'm talking about minor children. So my 17-year-old that's with me, I just gave him the hand-me-down used phone, and that's the first time he's had his own phone. It's locked down. It doesn't have internet. It has the resources we want him to have on there, and he has it because he works a job, and he and his brother can call. And but on this trip, his brother kept it because he's going to go do the job. And guess what? They've adjusted fine. My kids are socially capable. They have great communication skills, and I'm bragging a little bit, but I'm not trying to be proud about that. But they're capable with people, and they have been just fine without having an iPhone. Now, when they've turned 17 or 18, they've gotten their own phone. They've had computers before that, and we have a judicious use of that. They get on our social media and maybe look at what their friends are doing or whatever, but you have to make a decision, and sometimes the decisions are tough. But if you allow unfettered access to their phones, you will almost definitely lose the hearts of your children. Think about this. 1 o'clock in the morning, the people walking into your kid's bedroom. You're fast asleep. And there are people potentially communicating with your kids that you would never, ever want them to communicate with in broad daylight without you being there to walk with them. And if you have them with their own phone and their own access to the internet, infinity in their pockets, you have to recognize anyone and everyone can communicate with them, and they can communicate with anyone and everyone themselves. And they don't have the discernment or the wisdom to know how to navigate those relationships. So you might need to dial back what you have allowed into the hands, the lives of your children. I have gone over. I think what we have now is lunchtime. If you want, while they're preparing lunch, if anybody has questions or comments or things they want to add, I'm happy to hear that. Yes? Well, first of all, their involvement with technology is not non-existent. It's just on our things or whatever. So it's not, and even then, it's not unfettered. It's not internet. It's not, and social media. When they're 18s, they're legal adults, and you know, we caution them things, and they haven't had significant problems with it. And we still, if they're in our house, like, it's not an acceptable pattern to just be in your room hiding on your phone. We live in a community, a family, and so we do those things. Another thing, this is just a side thing, in our house, you don't walk around with earbuds. Music and things that you're listening to, that should be community. Now, when somebody's studying or doing their schoolwork and they're focused on something in particular, that's different. Or they're going to exercise, but when it's us together, we're not just hanging around with everybody having their own kind of, well, I like this music or I like that. No, we do those things as a group, and we might share things and have a blend of those things. So it's the autonomy that it creates. It's an I phone, and they live an I life. In fact, one author, the author from the Atlantic, has dubbed the generation iGen. I don't know if it was her that came up with it, but it's really impacting our young people. And we should be very concerned with the depression, the loneliness, the lack of real friendships and relationships, and the depression and the suicide rates that are going through the roof. And I know that's true in this country as well. We should be concerned about that. And we should say, we love you enough to say, you're not just going to have one because everybody else have one. Everybody has an iPhone. I need an iPhone. Everybody doesn't have one because you don't have one. So guess what? Everybody doesn't have an iPhone. Right? All right. Anybody else? And we're dismissed. I'm just open to questions. All right. A little bit of a hodgepodge, bringing in some things that I hope it was somewhat helpful and maybe cause you to think about your own use and the way we use technology with our kids. God bless you all.